2 days later, the phone rang. "Mrs. Collins?" The voice on the line was careful, hesitant. "This is Mike from the dealership. I wanted to follow up about your husband's car." My throat tightened. "What about it?" "Well," the man continued, "your husband came in last week, said he was making arrangements, but he didn't trade it for another vehicle, just asked me to hold the funds, said he'd be back." I frowned. Hold the funds for what? The man hesitated. "He told me not to call unless something happened. Said to tell you, and I quote, 'If Anna ever asks, tell her there's something going on in my life.' For 20 years, that car had sat in the same spot, gleaming, stubborn, proud. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a monument to my husband's determination, a reward carved out of 2 decades of labor and self-denial. And now there was only an oil stain left behind, like a ghost of everything he'd ever worked for. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My name is Anna Collins, and I'm 60 years old now. But that morning, the morning the garage went empty, I felt older than I ever had before. I called out, "Ethan?" My voice cracked halfway through. Our son's door creaked open upstairs. I heard his sneakers hit the wood floor. Heavy, hesitant steps. He looked 16 again for a second, even though he was already in his 20s by then. The same soft guilt in his eyes, the same awkward way he couldn't meet mine. "Mom," he said quietly. "Where's your father's car?" I asked, already dreading the answer. He swallowed. I sold it." My heart dropped. "You what?" "Dad said it was okay," he blurted. "He told me you always wanted to go to Paris, and I thought maybe if I did something nice." I couldn't even hear the rest. I just stared at him, every sound in the world disappearing except the pounding in my ears. "Your father let you sell his car?" I whispered. He nodded, eyes down. "He said you'd understand later." Understand later. It was such a small phrase, but it hollowed me out. That evening, my husband, Mark, came home. His hair had more gray in it than I remembered, his shoulders slightly bent. He dropped his work bag by the door and smiled faintly when he saw me, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mark," I said, keeping my tone steady, "where's your car?" He froze. "Ethan told you." "He sold it," I said. "The car you've been saving, fixing, polishing for half your life." He sat down heavily on the couch. I told him it was fine. "Fine?" My voice rose. "You loved that car. You called it your second heart. You wouldn't even let me drive it to the grocery store." He rubbed his face with both hands. "It's just a car, Anna." I stood there stunned. No, it's not just a car. It's what you built with your hands, with your time. You used to say it was proof that hard work meant something. He looked up at me with those soft, tired eyes. Maybe that's the problem. I spent too long proving things that don't matter. I wanted to argue, but the sadness in his voice silenced me. That night, he went to bed early. I stayed in the living room, staring out at the driveway. Empty, quiet, accusing. 2 days later, the phone rang. "Mrs. Collins?" The voice on the line was careful, hesitant. "This is Mike from the dealership. I wanted to follow up about your husband's car." My throat tightened. "What about it?" "Well," the man continued, "your husband came in last week, said he was making arrangements, but he didn't trade it for another vehicle, just asked me to hold the funds, said he'd be back." I frowned. "Hold the funds for what?" The man hesitated. "He told me not to call unless something happened, said to tell you, and I quote, if Anna ever asks, tell her there's something going on in my life. Something going on in his life. The words echoed through me like a chill wind. After I hung up, the house felt impossibly quiet. That evening, I found Mark sitting in the backyard, staring at the sunset. You went to the dealership? I said. He didn't look surprised. You talked to Mike? Mark, what's happening? What's going on in your life? He smiled faintly, almost sadly. You ever noticed how quiet it gets right before dark? The world slows down just enough to make you think. Mark, I said, my voice trembling. Please. He sighed and turned toward me. The light caught his face, and for the first time, I saw it. The hollowness beneath his eyes, the pallor under his skin. Anna, he said quietly, the car wasn't for Paris. I told Ethan that so he wouldn't worry. My hands went cold. Then what was it for? He hesitated. Hospital bills, tests. The insurance doesn't cover everything. It took a second for the words to register. Then the world shifted. For you? I whispered. He looked down, nodding. No, I said, shaking my head. No, no, no. Anna, his voice was calm, almost gentle. My knees went weak. You're sick? He exhaled slowly. They found something in my lungs. It's advanced. I've been doing treatments for a while now. I thought maybe I could handle it quietly, but you sold your dream, I choked out. You sold your car for medicine? He smiled weakly. It's just metal, Anna. You and Ethan, you're what matters. I collapsed beside him on the grass, clutching his hands. You should have told me. He looked out toward the horizon. I didn't want our last months together to be all about fear. The silence that followed was unbearable. The days that came after blurred together. Hospital visits, whispered phone calls, quiet dinners where no one said what they were thinking. Ethan grew pale from guilt. I grew numb from trying to stay strong. Mark started fading faster than I expected. Some mornings, he couldn't even lift his coffee mug. Yet, he still tried to smile, still cracked jokes that made Ethan laugh through his tears. One night, he held my hand and said softly, "You remember the Christmas when we couldn't afford gifts, and you told me the best present would be a promise we'd never give up on each other?" I nodded. He smiled faintly. We kept that promise, didn't we? I kissed his forehead. We did. Outside, the wind howled against the garage door. And for the first time, I realized that the sound I used to associate with peace now only meant loss. The morning Mark passed away, the world was painfully ordinary. Birds sang, the sun rose, the coffee maker gurgled like always, but the space beside me in bed was empty, and the silence had a different weight to it. He was gone. I remember standing in that same garage hours later, staring at the oil stain on the floor again, the ghostly outline where his par used to be. It felt like the whole house had a heartbeat missing. Ethan came up behind me, quiet as a shadow. "Mom," he whispered, "he wanted me to give you something." He handed me a small box, old, scratched, tied with a piece of twine. Inside was a folded note and a tiny keychain shaped like the Eiffel Tower. The note said, in his uneven handwriting, "Anna, you always wanted to see Paris. Don't let me be the reason you don't. When you do go, take Ethan. Let him see that dreams aren't just for cars and paychecks. They're for living. Love always, Mark. I cried until my body couldn't make any more sound. A few weeks later, I went to the dealership myself. Mike, the salesman, greeted me quietly. "He asked me to give you something," he said, reaching behind the counter. It wasn't paperwork. It wasn't money. It was a small envelope with my name on it. Inside was a photo, Mark standing beside a different car, smaller, older, clearly worn down, but with the same familiar smile on his face. He traded the funds for this, Mike explained, said it was a project, something he wanted to finish before. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The next day, I found that very car, covered under a tarp in a storage lot a few miles away. It wasn't much to look at, not compared to the one he'd loved for years, but sitting in the driver's seat, I found a sealed envelope in the glove box. It read, "For Anna, so you can still drive somewhere new." Inside were 2 plane tickets. Destination, Paris. A year passed, then another. Ethan graduated. The house got quieter, but I never filled the garage again. I couldn't. That empty space became something sacred, a quiet museum of what love costs and what it gives back. Some nights, I sit there with a cup of tea, staring at the old oil stain, and I can almost hear him humming from the kitchen, the way he used to when he thought no one was listening. People say grief fades, but I don't think it does. It just changes shape. One day, I finally used those tickets. Ethan and I flew to Paris. We walked by the Seine, saw the Eiffel Tower glow at night, but the moment that broke me wasn't the city lights. It was when I saw an old red car parked by the riverbank. It looked just like his. I touched the door handle and whispered, "We made it, Mark." Ethan didn't say anything. He just held my hand tighter. Now, at 60, I tell this story not because it's tragic, though it is, but because it reminds me that love leaves marks deeper than loss. The garage is still empty. I've never filled that space. But sometimes, when the wind hits the door just right, it creaks the way it did the morning I first found it bare. And I like to think that's him, reminding me he's still here somewhere. Still keeping that promise.